Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for none other than Jar Jar Binks. We'll then compare those results to all the other characters we've done thus far and see where he ends up being ranked, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But before getting to any and all of that, you can of course already nominate and or vote for which character we do next. Just respond to my pinned comment below with a character's name, or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Whichever single comment gets the most votes in the next 24 hours or so will be the winner. Alright, and now on to the results for Jar Jar Binks, where we ended up with this odd, almost E shape here. But anyway, breaking it down, 27% of voters thought Jar Jar deserved an A, 7% then gave him a B, 24% thought he was middle of the road or a C tier character, which left 15% to give him a D, and a final 27% to balance this all out nearly perfectly and give him an F. Which then means when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, Jar Jar Binks ends up with an average score of 2.92, which puts him into 27th place overall, and only ahead of Rey and just a little ways behind Kylo Ren. And though I know I say this quite often, but I really had no clue how this one was going to turn out, and I could have easily seen this going any number of different ways. Anyway, I won't waste too much time here with preamble. Instead, I'll once again just say thank you to everyone who takes the time to vote, comment, and watch the videos. It's all greatly appreciated, and I really do hope you've all been enjoying this series as much as I have. That said, let's begin, as we always do, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from the Scoundrels Cantina, who said, he is obviously an A. And well, I don't know about that being obvious, because the funny thing about Jar Jar is, I certainly think there's a case to be made both ways in regards to him. That there's a lot you can find to love about him and reasons to give him an A, and a lot you can find to hate and reasons to give him an F. And there's also a lot of reasons to just be indifferent or apathetic towards him and give him a C, and that's kind of exactly what we ended up with and see in these results, and kind of goes along with our second highest rated comment, which comes to us from Kyran Cummings, who said, I can't wait for the 30% A and 30% F representative of the two types of people in this world. And though I certainly get or understand what you're trying to say, I don't really know if we can extrapolate something like that from these results, that different types of people voted different ways on Jar Jar Binks. In fact, there were actually very, very few what you might call negative comments, and I don't really recall any that were just flat out mean-spirited or spiteful or malicious. Most of the negative ones were just people saying something like he was too much or too goofy or just didn't seem to fit in Star Wars, or they quoted Qui-Gon Jinn's "the ability to speak doesn't make you intelligent." And really here, I think if we could break things down, we'd find one of the biggest factors that separates how people voted, or the two extremes, would be age. I think obviously you'd find the younger you are or were during the prequels, the more likely you were to give him an A, while the older you were, the more likely you are to give him an F. The other big factor is whether or not you believe in the Darth Jar Jar theory, with many comments saying he's an A as long as that theory is true. And speaking of that theory, let's get to this comment now from DeBits, who said, he was intended to be the original Darth Plagueis, Palpatine's master. Too bad George Lucas chickened out and created Count Dooku at the last moment. We also here have this one from Gregory B, who said, the hours and hours of joy brought to my life by Darth Jar Jar content and discussions is more than enough to turn a once easy F character into one of my all-time favorites. Ever since I first saw a video breaking down the Darth Jar Jar theory, The Phantom Menace has been a completely different film for me. Then there's also this one from Jerugalo, who quotes George Lucas and says, Jar Jar is the key to all of this. Okay, so first of all here, yes, the Darth Jar Jar theory is a lot of fun, that he is the mastermind behind pretty much everything in Star Wars. And if it had somehow happened or come to fruition, it would have been one of the biggest and strangest twists in the history of film. However, I don't honestly know if this was ever something George Lucas had in mind or envisioned, and I know a lot of people love to quote him when he said Jar Jar is the key to all this, but they always take that out of context or fail to mention what he said next. And I'll quickly play the clip for you right now.
Jar Jar is the key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
In other words, he wasn't saying or implying that Jar Jar was the key to the whole story, even though, yes, he is important, and we'll get to that. He was just worried about being able to get the character itself to work on screen, the technology behind it. especially because it's a funnier character than they've ever had before in Star Wars, like he said. In other words, this isn't so much evidence for the Darth Jar Jar theory, as it is that even Lucas had his concerns about Jar Jar going into it. And yes, I know there is other evidence out there, like the fact that Jar Jar seems to lip sync some of the lines the actors or characters do at certain points, almost like he's playing puppeteer and making them say these things. And that is curious because, of course, that had to be purposely or intentionally done by the animators, which seems strange. But I think it was more likely done to have him look or feel more lifelike. I think they were so worried about him looking stiff and rigid and unrealistic in the background that they went overboard and had him make all these little movements and such just to make him feel more real or like he was actually there. Plus, he is a jittery character in general. But then again, who knows? Maybe there is something to the Darth Jar Jar theory. I'm just very skeptical, but again, it is entertaining. Okay, and next up here we have this comment from Money Kenny who said, I can't really list anything good about him other than the technical marvel of a fully CG character in 1999. I don't think any of his jokes are funny, and I don't like the ridiculous amount of screen time he gets for such a shallow character. Also responsible for turning a lot of people off from Star Wars when The Phantom Menace came out. My dad, for instance, Jar Jar made him refuse to watch the other 2 episodes. F tier for me. Responsible for the best theory in all of Star Wars, though. And you know, the thing I find so strange about Jar Jar is that, as you point out, he's basically the first all CGI main or supporting character in a film, one of the first demonstrations of how seamlessly an all-digital character can be added to a movie, and yet you go over the top with his goofiness and make him stick out like a sore thumb and feel out of place in live action. I just don't get that. And so personally, it's not his antics and all that which bugs me so much, though honestly I could have lived without ever getting fart and poop jokes in Star Wars. It's just that here's this incredible technology where you can convince people that a digital character is right there with the live action characters, and instead of trying to make him as realistic as possible to try to get him to just blend in, you make him like a cartoon or animated character and call attention to what he basically really is. Again, I just don't get that line of thinking with Jar Jar. Anyway, now on to this comment from Nick Vegas who said, Ahmad Best is great and is a pioneer in the motion capture field and seems like an all-around great guy, but Jar Jar as a character is just the worst. And look, say what you will about Jar Jar Binks the character, but it truly is a shame that Ahmad Best, the man, who not only seems like a great person and a really talented one, that he took so much flack over the character and basically had his career ruined before it could ever really take off, and he almost had his life ruined as well. And I know some think it was the fans that were brutal towards him, and no doubt some of them were, but he took a lot more heat from the media. Either way, I think it's awesome that now he seems to be fully embraced by the fandom, and I wish the guy nothing but the best and hope to see a lot more of him in the future. Alright, and now on to this comment from Back to the Future fan 88 who said, while yes, Jar Jar can be annoying at times, I still really enjoy his character. I think he has a great story arc. He went from an outcast to a general, then a senator, and that's just in one movie. Also, his and Mace Windu's interactions in that one arc in Season 6 of The Clone Wars were hilarious. Also, here we have this one from Connor Nicholas who said, he's perfectly fine for what he is, a bit of comic relief. He doesn't need to be anything profound or deep. He's not designed to be your favorite character. That's for the main characters. I've always been genuinely puzzled over the hate for him. Also, we have this comment from Derek Lopez who said, he's the reason why Palpatine became powerful. He gave him emergency powers during his speech in Attack of the Clones. Despite his clumsy, comic relief nature, Jar Jar Binks is quite a remarkable character. George Lucas himself said that Jar Jar is his favorite character. Next then, we have this one from Torchy who said, just think about the deep character arc of Jar Jar for a moment. He goes from being this failure of a Gungan that the audience can feel for and relate to. We feel his pain when Sebulba beats him up. Then in episode 2, we see how over the 10 years he has evolved to become the representative for Padme Amidala, one of the most renowned and popular senators of her time. The amount of hard work and perseverance he had to go through is something insane, and it is a personal journey that I think we as the audience can be inspired by. Then we also have this one from Cornelius Evazan who said, he is the reason for everything. He may be annoying, but he has a significant impact on the story and shows how easy a weak-minded is manipulated. B for me. Okay, so in the comments there were basically 2 camps here. Those who said Jar Jar was a completely worthless, frivolous character who had no sort of arc, and those who said he is an extremely important character with a deep, meaningful arc. And not to sound like a politician or anything, but I'd say it's a little bit of both. Because Jar Jar is extremely important to the story. He is the one that helps get Palpatine emergency powers and opens the door for him to declare himself Emperor in the next movie. He also is important to Episode 1. He does go from an outcast to a general, and helps bring the Gungans and Naboo together, which sounds like a heck of a story arc, and it really kind of is, until you realize there is not really much personal growth there. He just sort of stumbles into all this happening, and is the same sort of bumbling idiot at the end that he was at the beginning. Now, it does seem like in Episode 2 he gets his act together, that he's come a long way, and that he's a different character. He's not tripping over himself and taking out tanks and destroyer droids in the process. Though at the same time, he's not in there a whole lot. We don't see him in any sort of action sequence. He's also in the Clone Wars animated series, and he's better there too, but he's still kind of this goofball or bumbling idiot most of the time, which is just sort of who and what he is and always will be, I suppose. So if I had to sum him up, I'd say it's a heck of a story that he goes through, but there's not a ton of personal growth there, beyond getting a little bit more confidence, which actually is kind of what gets him into trouble. And to start to explain what I mean by that, let's get to this comment from Chris Sosa, who said, "I don't know how some can like Jar Jar when every heroic thing he has done is by accident." And that's kind of the irony of Jar Jar Binks' story. In The Phantom Menace, pretty much everything he does basically happens by accident. He's not really intending good things to happen, they just do. Things just go his way, and they go well for him and everyone else. Then in Attack of the Clones, after he's grown a bit as a character, and he has a little bit of that confidence, actually tries to do something good and intentional when he calls for the Senate to give emergency powers to Palpatine, but this will of course ultimately backfire in an epic way. Anyway though, when it comes to Jar Jar's incredible luck, I've always just thought it was the Force manifesting in a different way, that it sort of works through him, that unlike a Jedi or a Sith who control the Force or it obeys their command to a degree, the Force sort of controls Jar Jar. And so all these crazy things he accidentally does leads to positive things because of the Force. And again, the one time he tries to purposely do something, it all goes wrong and Palpatine ends up ruling the galaxy. Alright, and now it's time for just a few final comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Connor Harrison, who said, "I was 9 years old when I saw Episode 1 in the movie theater. I loved Star Wars since I could remember. The EU back in the 90s was all we really had, I feel like, and it didn't seem to matter then. For me, Episode 1 just brings nostalgia and happy memories of being a kid. I am grateful I got to experience that." Then there's this comment from Ethan9HX who said, "I think a lot of people don't realize how deep his character actually goes. He wasn't just thrown in the movie willy-nilly. I think it's so cool how part of The Phantom Menace is about the relationship between the Naboo and the Gungans. It's clear that they don't like each other because the Naboo look down on the Gungans, and Jar Jar, this clumsy outcast, is able to unite them when the Naboo get in a conflict with the Trade Federation, because he tells Queen Amidala that the Gungans can help them with their army. The conflict just really feels real, and like something we'd see in our world today. It's also neat how you can trace his actions to being the one who helped Qui-Gon discover Anakin, the Chosen One, and without Jar Jar they might never have found him. He's funny and quite relatable to kids as being someone who is looked down upon, but can still be a hero. He gets an A." We also then have this one from Hank Hill's WD-40 Dispensary, who said, "Jokes aside, I actually quite like Jar Jar. Sure, he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he has left an impression on all Star Wars fans, for better or worse. I'd give him an A." Next then, we also have this comment from Ishan D, who said, "I could go on a rant about how Jar Jar is very annoying, but Jar Jar is more than that. He was a weak-minded person that found his way to power, only to be manipulated by Palpatine and essentially start the Empire. He's the first of many senators to fall into Palpatine's grasp. Sure, he's annoying, he's an annoying idiot, but he's supposed to be this. Without him, Star Wars would basically be non-existent. A for me." Then there's also this comment from Javier Ignacio Marmoz, who said, "I like him a lot, never had any issues with him. In later years I found out some despised him, but let me tell you two things. George Lucas started the prequels as a journey from infancy or boyhood to the adult tragedy of Anakin's fall, and it's fitting in Episode 1 that it's more childlike in spirit. Jar Jar represents that innocence. The other thing, my kids love him, they truly find him funny, and that makes me appreciate what the character brings to screen for kids. Misa thinking he's a solid B for me." Then there's this one from Wade, Australia, who said, "Like Ahmad Best once said, Jar Jar will always be there for you. He'll never let you down. A." And finally here, this one from Willow Lackett, who quoted George Lucas once again and said, "Jar Jar is the key to all of this." And absolutely, in many ways, he was. He was responsible for much of what happened in the prequels, sometimes by accident, and other times because of well-intended actions that were actually behind-the-scenes manipulation by Palpatine. And again, I think his is an interesting story that's presented in a way that obviously some people really enjoyed, and some people really did not. You also have those people in the middle that are either sort of apathetic, or that they can see the good and the bad and figured they balanced each other out. And so I'll just end this video by reiterating what one of the final comments said, that for good or bad, Jar Jar Binks is one of the most memorable characters in the history of Star Wars. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Jar Jar Binks, or what I or anyone else had to say about him here in this video, or you can feel free to nominate and or vote for which character we do next. Either way, do leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.